Commission meeting for July 11, 2017, and ask Ms. Warner for a confirmation of quorum.
Commissioners Wilson,
Present.
Ackland,
Present.
Wiggins,
Present.
Stidham,
Present.
Daring, Present, Moorhead,
Present.
absent are Burt, Castleman, and Hubon.
Thank you. Please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Included with our agenda are minutes for June 6. I'd ask for a motion to resolve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for June 6th. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. We have no unfinished business. We do have a few items under new business. Before we get deeply into section A, which are 4 different sections, and I do want to commend the members who came to the city council meeting and presented our report. And obviously, there have been some discussions regarding our report. Nothing negative or critical of the commission, but there were some questions posed regarding that. And so in light of the fact that the questions posed were substantive to our report, I went ahead and asked for us to reconvene to go over some of the questions that were raised. Before we get into the specifics, technically we do possess the ability to just stand by our report as is. We also have so we can disregard the questions or we can go through them individually. I do believe, because a couple of these were actually, if you remember in the report, there was recommended ballot language, I think in our reports on page 21, that the way those are not broken out into 25 questions. Obviously, staff has kind of consolidated when things were relevant and overlapping. And so I think it bears merit that we ensure that we are going to the voters with exactly what our report was meant to be, and the substantive questions of the council are worthy of discussion. So unless somebody wishes to just dispose and move past the questions, I'd entertain a motion, but I'm actually encouraging that we go through each item. With that being said, we'll move on to the first one, and that deals with, in our agenda, it deals with section 1.2 of definitions. In our report, it actually deals with section 1, B, and I believe C as well. And that would start on page 6 and go primarily onto page 7. The question being proposed regarding this was primarily more of a question than a concern. There was the language that we have posed here, specifically on the top of page 7, was highlighted, nor of the council hiring the former municipal judge to serve a new term as municipal judge. The question, and I'll read the way it was presented to me, the point was, the question was, is the point not to clarify the former judge's ability to run for city office, but to allow the council to rehire the judge and to rehire the prosecutor? Could the commission go back and consider this adjustment? So when looking at this, it seems that there's some ambiguity about the way this is being read. Staff.
Thank you, sir. This is actually Jonathan's fault. Actually, Jonathan and I, if you read on page 7 for both B, which is the first justification you see, and C, the justification for C, when Jonathan and I were working on this, we actually wrote a bad justification for this. I'll leave that to you, sir. What we had put in here was that was more than what you all were trying to do. You were simply trying to allow the council to rehire a municipal judge. The bold wording is the proposed new wording. So the justification is simply, the additional wording would allow the council, should a municipal judge leave, and it was 4 months after the municipal judge left, and the council wanted to hire that particular municipal judge back, then they would have that ability. And that's why the bold wording was put in here. We did way too much with the justification language in here. We're not proposing any changes to what you all had added. We're just simply saying, we did a bad job with the justification language that's in your document, and we'd like the ability to go back and rewrite the justification to limit it to that. And I'll.
You have proposed language?
Yes.
So the proposed language, and I'll provide this to the chairman, I'm sorry, I only made one extra copy of it, I should have made more, would be basically to say, during its review of the charter, the commission expressed a need to clarify the ability of the council to rehire a former municipal judge to serve a new term as municipal judge in spite of the prohibition for other types of municipal employment. Foregoing language was proposed to address the same. Removes the references with regard to the city prosecuting attorney, which will come in the next paragraph, to serve on the city council and as mayor. So you've got removal of the reference for and the city prosecuting attorney to serve on the city council or as mayor following their terms.
Does any member of the commission have any questions of staff? So to summarize, we are going to do a modification of the report to give back to the council with the adjustment recommended by staff.
Because you all had voted on this wording originally, we would ask for a vote of the commission to change to the recommended language on these two justifications.
Well, and I think every member of the commission here would also point out, we will take responsibility. You guys shouldn't, because we read it, approved it, signed it. So we felt that was good language initially. So any ambiguity is no one's fault at this point, but we'll correct it nonetheless. So turning to the members of the commission, do you guys have any problem with the recommendation of staff just deleting the partial sentence of the first sentence of the justification on page 7, removing the rest of well, there's a dependent clause there. So if you look at the third line, it says municipal judge, then the third word is and. If we remove the remainder leading up to the comma in the next sentence, or in the next line. So it would be deleting and the city prosecuting attorney to serve on the city council or as mayor following their terms.
Okay, I think you want to pass it around. Might make it easier for them to see.
Those of us that are slow.
Nope, nope.
like
It's
to-
not
No
it's not
rush.
slow, it's a question of being visual.
Right on.
Hat. That's the first time I've ever seen her without a hat.
Victoria still got there before the hair.
Ms. Hubach, we're excited to see you.
I need to get over
Would you
there.
like to go ahead and sit, and I'll wheel you over? You wanna sit? Just sit back.
While Ms. Hubach's getting herself situated, I would suggest to the other councilmen or commission members that in item C, there is additional bolded language that we approved, and I believe there's no ambiguity regarding that additional language, and it is mentioned in the justification. This is a definitional section, and we had the 1-year prohibition for the judge, but not the prosecutor. So it's merely adding that language in to mean both. So B and C are separate and needed their own justifications. So does not seem to be any concern about that. Ms. Hubach, if you would indulge me to let me catch you up for a moment.
Okay. I'll have to tell you, on May the 30th, I turned 90. That was bad enough. But today I was notified that I had Parkinson's. So there's the only thing, I can't do anything about the Parkinson's and I can't do anything about the 90, but I sure can do something about the handicap possibilities here in the city. And I'll start in with City Hall. You can't get in there from here. So I'm ready to go.
Fair enough, fair enough. Your comments are not ignored. What we are talking about is, in our agenda, there are 4 questions that, from the council, that have been posed back to us that we feel are substantive in nature, and we should clarify or make sure we have them properly defined before we present them forward. We're talking about the first one, which is dealing with language about the prosecutor and judge.
Green would be the new, and we're crossing out what we're taking out right there.
Okay,
Here's the existing.
thank you.
It's right here.
All these men waiting on it.
Can I ask you first, before we get started on that, how was the reception with the city council? Was it positive, negative, or indifferent?
I would define it personally as receptive. I can't say positive, but I can only say that there were not any criticisms, there were questions. There were issues where they felt maybe some language was ambiguous, or they wanted things looked at a second look.
Okay.
But there was no criticism or anything that would rise to that level of concern.
Makes me get a closer look and see.
Ms. Hubach, the staff has indicated that the question that has been posed to us is that the language change, the one sentence that is recommended, there was some question that the change didn't necessarily match the justification in the report. Staff has indicated a willingness to believe that there was a slight miscommunication, that if there's a language change in here, specifically deleting a small portion, that would help clarify that, and that would help make the rest of it
And that's
more
what
smooth.
you're working on a motion for that now?
Yes. So staff has recommended a language change. So back to the full commission. I'll entertain a motion to accept staff's recommendation.
I am going to move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so now we're at discussion. How do you guys feel about this type of change?
I think
No,
Please,
I
after
was
you.
just, I don't see it much different than we had originally talked about, so. I mean,
it fits what our intent
Yeah.
is per, like, focus for the change. So,
Yeah, and I don't believe it actually ultimately changes the ultimate issue that would go to the voters.
Correct.
It offers a more clear definition, and I think that was a good catch, but the catch was not a gaping hole in what we did, so we kind of tightened it up, so it's a little more communicable to the council.
it's less ambiguity and more direct, yeah, clarity.
And the value of this discussion tonight, I would reiterate, is because we are being filmed. My suspicion is the council will take a look at this prior to the next their work session on this. So since we've been asked to kind of go back and review, we are not required to, but if we do, let's make sure to verbalize any thoughts we have, because that will help communicate that to kind of over the air. Okay, so we have a motion, a second on that. Any other discussion on this issue? Seeing none, all in favor? The amendment is made, or the motion passes unanimously. Moving to item 2, I believe item 2 is actually under 2B. One in reference is 2B, and then I believe a second reference
That's it for that one. That's it for that one. This is
under
Jonathan's.
5C, I believe, as well.
Yes.
I'm sorry, where are we again? Apologies.
We're on page 8 for the first reference. It's a duplicate reference, though.
Yeah, one references the council members, the second one references the mayor. This is with regard, I'm sorry.
No, please, Steph.
This is with regard to the pay and compensation for mayor and council. So there are two different sections in the charter, one that's addressing specifically the mayor, one that's addressing the council. When we had previously proposed this had looked like we'd utilized hey, here's the CPI and automatic increases over a period of time. Some of the recommendation that came back from the council's review of it was to perhaps alter that slightly, and so I'll let the chairman voice in on that one.
There were 3 components to the question on council pay. One was the issue of the automatic adjustment, the COLA or Consumer Price Index increase. The other one was the requirement of the council to deal with the issue of pay. The council, under the charter, the original language, the citizens, again, they dictate how we get paid. But they've put in the charter that the council gets to determine the pay. So they have ceded that authority to the council. It says that it's to be reviewed, but it does not specifically mandate a time that gets reviewed. That was the second issue about consideration. And then the third component was dealing with the proration issue when a council member comes on and leaves. Ms. Hubach, I know that was an issue you spoke directly about. So there are 3 substantive components to this. So I will, under normal circumstances, I would ask for a motion to create discussion, but I'll first ask for any staff comments or recommendations first, if they have any. And then I'd like to actually kind of break a little of Robert's rules and open up for discussion per each one. I don't want to bounce through the 3. And then we'll see if we need a motion or not. Seth?
So I looked at this, and the comments that were made during the course of the council's consideration, a number of them focused on removing the complications of the CPI and the Mountain Index and all those things to go along with it, and instead insert a reference that says the council will consider compensation on at least an annual basis by making it a part of their agenda. This avoids a council member having to stick his neck out on the line. I'm sorry, that's probably not the appropriate terminology. That avoids having a council member individually have to bring up the compensation issue for consideration. It requires the council to consider, is our compensation staying in line with surrounding communities, and it makes it so that there's an automatic place setter on an agenda for discussion of compensation for both the council as well as the mayor. The language that I've identified, and basically it would stay the same in most regards. So the council may determine the compensation of council members by ordinance, but no ordinance changing such compensation shall become effective for a council member until the commencement of his or her new term of office. That would be basically the same as it currently reads in the charter. The potential addition would be, on at least an annual basis, the compensation of council members shall be placed upon an agenda and discussed by the council at a work session to determine the need for any alterations. So you're removing an automatic increase, but you're making a reference that they will at least annually show up on an agenda item for the council to consider and discuss.
Let me ask this, did we ever consider having a citizens group, Mr. Chair? Did we ever consider having a citizens group involved in this pay increases along with the others?
Respectfully, Ms. Hubach, we are the citizens group that is being charged with reviewing this. Now, as far as, has the mayor ever called for one? We've not ever had one to date.
There's a typo there real shortly that I corrected it not to a no.
Is this the recommended language?
No, sir. This was staff's attempt to create language that we believed reflected the concern that was no recommendation one way or
Thank
the other. It was to give an alternative to what is in there to reflect the concern.
Okay, okay. So,
Mr. Chair, if I could.
yes,
I had asked the staff to take a look at this particular item. After the first work session, and the comments that came from a couple of the council members with regard to compensation, I had hoped to explore some other alternative that would allow for it still be the onus of the council to establish that and not be something that automatically occurred. It should be something that we own as elected officials if we're going to consider any kind of a compensation increase, just like any other legislative body. And rather than have that built into some kind of a charter, I felt like the articulation on that particular topic should be made on that item. And by putting it on an annual review basis after the election and prior to the adoption of the budget, there's an awful lot that can be done in the planning phases and discussion phases, and also into exploration on what's going on in other communities that would allow for us to then make a much more educated, articulated argument on why future councils might be due higher compensation or a change in compensation. I didn't feel like, and a couple of my colleagues didn't feel like that an automatic adjustment was an appropriate way to handle that. But now, if we were to have it in the charter, that we were to review it on an annual basis, at least it offers it up for discussion on a regular basis so they can talk about it, rather than somebody having to dip their toe in the water and bring the issue up and maybe a shark bite it off. So, I mean, that's kind of where we're at on that, and I had hoped that you guys would consider that.
okay. We have 3 independent components here that have been presented, so like I said, I'm kind of breaking a little protocol without a motion to see what kind of discussion we wish to have on this, but I'd like to keep them to the separate 3 points. The first point would be, is the removal of the automatic adjustment. That's the first issue. Does anybody feel that there's any additional discussion or would like to make any, or like to discuss the idea of reconsideration?
Can I ask
Mr.
you a
Wiggin?
question?
Yeah, oh, no, go ahead, Mr.
When was the last pay review?
1942.
No,
I mean, it's,
But
that was,
it was probably
because that was gonna be kind of my
It was
lead
like
into it is,
1998.
4 years ago, we had a 3-hour work session on this particular topic. And it was mentioned to me that roughly 1998
yeah,
was the it's been almost 20 years.
Okay, that's when I was on.
yeah, because that was gonna be my point of
So I
clarification.
think there needs to be something done because this is ridiculous.
We need
Yeah,
to
could-
get up to speed, and I think
Yeah,
that
we
we
do. We
touched on that way back
need 20 years.
on this.
I thought that was the purpose of going to this was no one's willing to step forward, and the one time that somebody did step forward, it was quickly withdrawn, if I remember from watching the work session and stuff. So the conversations come up, and it basically is no one's willing to put their neck on the line, stick their head out, because they're afraid that they won't get reelected or whatever the case may be. Because if somebody steps forward and says, you know what, I think first of all, all council members need an immediate $5,000, or not immediate, but a $5,000 raise and then an annual increase of blah, 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 because, I mean, what did we decide? I can't remember the math, but it's $4,200 a year, and Belton's is $12,000 a year, I mean,
Is it really?
wasn't it, I
Yeah,
can't remember.
it's a substantial.
Raymore is like boondock, old school, not paying their council members jack squat, and this was a way to force the increases. Now, given it will never at 1.1% or whatever the CPI stuff is, it'll never get to something that's in line with today, but no one's willing to step up either. Obviously, this puts it on
I
the
think
agenda,
I think
but it
it's
also
time to-
puts it on the agenda to basically say, oh, I'm not willing to go with this. It puts it on the agenda to basically be a conversation topic that nobody's willing to step forward to. So that's the hard, because that's why I thought why we put it in
Time to
place,
move
is it forces a raise when no one's willing to risk their seat to be able to
I
bring
think
up a
it's
topic,
time to
which is
do something.
completely appropriate for them
I
to
have
have a
no
raise.
idea it's been 20 years.
I will say, just to remind our previous discussions on this, one of the issues that we did discuss about was the idea that there gets to be a point, because it has been so long, that a dramatic increase to get to kind of what would be comparable. And I apologize, because I want the mayor to chime in on this, especially in light of what he just said. But the mayor had mentioned an issue in, I believe it was Raytown, where there was a dramatic pay increase with somebody, and the public got very resentful of that. And that was something that was discussed, and we discussed about the idea of what is compensation, what is needed, how do we get paid. We did talk about other municipalities. I believe, and staff can correct me, but I don't think that Belton gets 12,000. I believe that they do get, it is almost double what Rainbows is. The mayor may, but the council does not.
It's
So,
a substantial
But
increase.
They have
is,
a higher population.
it is much,
They have a higher population.
Barely.
I think by like 200 people.
Yeah.
We're literally neck and neck now.
We're about to step ahead of them.
Yeah, we will within the next 5
Well,
years.
I'm so surprised.
I believe that and this has been mentioned to me, that there was an attempt to do an increase in '05, which was voted no. In '07, there was a yes vote, but it was vetoed by the mayor.
That's right.
As additional information on this. The question before us is that we have a recommendation that we have put in our review. We've been asked to reconsider that. I don't want to start the entire discussion from the beginning, because that's not what we're being asked to do. We're being asked to consider it in light of some additional comments by the council. Those comments should be respected, but are not in order to tell us to do this. But I want to let the commission itself pick its path. Do we want to stay with that? And I do want to clarify one final thing. The language we are proposing first puts the burden or action on the council. So the council each year may gather, and the reason why I bring this up is it may relate to another component of the 3 points we're reconsidering, which is should there be a mandatory meeting on this, that the council has the ability to raise pay even with what we're recommending. It's only if they do not is there an adjustment. And then the final thing is, we are not submitting this for it to go into the charter. The residents will vote on this to determine whether this is what they want done. The voters can't reject this. So, with that being said, any additional comments, questions?
Well, in the verbiage on the voters, we need to be sure to let them know that there has not been a raise in 20 years.
We don't though. I mean, that's the problem.
Do what?
That's
Well,
not
if
how
they-
any of the proposed ballot language, so they wouldn't have any idea. Unless somebody watches this video, nobody would know there's not been a raise in 20 years.
Well, when we advertise, remember I showed you that leaflet from Lee Summit? Somehow we've got to let them realize that there's been no raise in 20 years.
And that's the hard thing, is because if somebody in the
Okay,
council,
I would see, that is a wonderful discussion point, but I would at least assert some authority to say, I would not want to entertain a motion that we amend our report to make that statement. I think I think that becomes a little too politicking on the issue. I'd like to leave that out.
Okay.
It's good for our discussion.
Well, I just think that when it comes to marketing at that point, I think that might be part of the marketing.
Okay,
I don't
understand.
think you wanna talk about that.
You can't
I really
market.
don't.
We can't say we encourage you to vote yes.
Well, and I'll, Stephanie, if I may, because I understood her comment to be as we are presenting information to the residents. So I don't want to get into a debate over the, what was.
I just feel that if more people might be more interested in being involved in the city and a lot of the committees, if they, I don't know, never mind.
Yeah, and actually, you,
Mr. Mayor.
if I could, you're going in the right direction, Steph, and the reason why we're asking for your consideration on the annual requirement is that it would then, as Ms. Hubach stated, give us an opportunity to do research on what area communities are doing. I think if you put in the automatic, and then somebody did have enough authority to step forward and say, I want to propose that we do a pay increase, then I think it does make it tougher for the community to accept, well, you're already getting this, and now you want this. And so it's either or is what we're asking for. I prefer not to go the CPI route, because I just don't think that it's an appropriate avenue for increasing. I really feel like it is we need to own it as an elected body. We need to articulate many of the reasons, like you just said, that it's been 20 years. We need to encourage good people in our community. It takes a lot these days to be an elected official here in town.
And how
A
many
lot of
hours
commitment of
put into
hours, exactly. And I think we can articulate those arguments well enough to push forward with that. And on an annual review, you might not get it done the first year. Heck, you might not even get it done the second year. But all these compounded arguments for it do build up, and I think that there will be an opportunity to convince folks that it's the right thing to do. And so with that annual, and I know that means every year we do it, and that seems like a long time, but frankly, they roll around pretty quick. And I just really feel like that's the best way for the board to own it
I agree with
and
that.
move forward appropriately.
And this is not a counterpoint to that, but I do, well, there is a certain component to
There's always a but.
there is a counterpoint, a little bit of a counterpoint. The dilemma that we've seen though, because since we have had some recent work, we had a recent work session on this within the last 5 years, and there have been expressed comments by council members when this issue has come up loosely, is there having a requirement, and again, we're blurring, I wanna be careful here, because having a requirement to meet does not mean it'll actually get addressed. And as to the first issue, I want to, because I want to be careful how I advocate myself on the three. The problem is 3 of the council members who spoke in the last substantive discussion were so factually inaccurate that it actually, there's only one person so far still on this council who has even expressed an issue of this. The others are completely, I mean, I've literally heard we should do this for free, it's our patriotic duty. I've heard people confuse this compensation with hourly rates of time, which, I mean, there's a whole discussion component that this isn't even pay. This is compensation, but I mean, there's a certain amount of, there are expenses related to serving on the council, and the council members who have advocated not doing the COLA adjustment are confused on that issue. And so the problem is the requested, I'm concerned for the request itself, because I think there are certain valid points that the mayor brings up that at some point somebody's got to be held to task on this, and there has to be a substantive discussion. The problem is some of those people who are advocating removing this won't have a valid discussion on it, and therefore we're going to go out another 3, 4, 5 years, which is going to compound the problem, and somebody eventually is going to have to take an uncomfortable position politically, which we cannot deny that politics factors in. The question is, ultimately, it's the citizens who determine whether the council gets paid or not. And they do that by what they put in their charter. But right now, they have allocated that authority to a council that for 20 years has not reasonably addressed that issue. And the problem keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and it's becoming worse to want to solve it, because who wants to be the bigger bad guy who back in '07, when they did pass, it was already contentious. 10 years later, from a consumer price index allocation, it is almost as absurd as the Belton Council doubling their rate. And who's gonna take that on? And so these are the practical discussions that will go in. So do we sit in a stalemate, or do we have to have, this is an alternative, it may not be a good alternative, and the residents may not want it, but it is at least addressing something or attempting to, that the residents control rather than the council.
My concern is, will it increase the quality of the council members? Or will it become one of those things where it does become kind of quasi-political thing? And it's not something that I really wanted to see the city get involved in. That's why I think it's very, very difficult for any organization to increase their own pay, because it always smells just a little bit of collusion and some other things. That's why I said have a blue ribbon committee, but appointed by the mayor, in the same way he appoints an ad hoc committee that says, we want to consider it. If you want us to do something, fine. If you don't, fine. But then let the blue ribbon committee, which would be composed entirely of citizens, not council members, not elected officials, but citizens at large, let them decide if they want to do something. That's the only fair, because they're footing the bill. And so let them decide if they wanted to address the issue or not. Let me just throw this in as an example. My daughter lives in Grass Pass, Oregon, and she was asked to be on the council, and she did. When it came time to run again, she refused to run because it costs $5,000 to run for the office, and they don't get paid a dime. So there's an example of where you lose out maybe on quality because you don't have to pay them enough, it's not worth their time. On the other way, you still have to talk about citizenship and doing things for free. You do it for the love of your country, for the love of your city. You don't do it because you're gonna get paid $350 next month. I feel very strongly about something like this because I cannot see that compensation has anything to do with the quality of the council and the kind of work that they do. So that's why I would leave it up completely to the citizens at large, a blue ribbon commission by the mayor, because the mayor is not subject to politics in the same way the rest of us are, because he runs over 3 years instead of every 2 years. Now maybe the rest of you don't agree, but that's after many years of working on the council and the city, that's how I come up with my rationale. I don't think it'll increase the quality of the people that are running for office. Maybe we don't need it, maybe we're getting the best, what is it they say, you get the government you deserve. And I hate to think that nationally, that we're getting the government we deserve. But
that's wonderfully profound, Ms. Hubach. Mr. Stidham.
You had mentioned that other charters. What other charters have it in their charter, or what other cities, communities have it in their charter that identifies who or what is the salary structure, or what increases that, the process? And then as a charter, do we not have, instead of, if you don't want to put a number on the ballot, do we not have the authority to ask the citizens to mandate to the council that they have a meeting specifically, not just a meeting where they could, but a meeting where they do meet and talk about salary? I remember when we were doing this, and my notes, this was kind of a hot potato, and I think we tossed it because it was an advantage to us to get it off the table. And I know that there are mixed council members' feelings about this. Some will never vote for one, for a pay increase. Others would. And I think it's our due diligence to determine at least what the process might be. I would agree with the mayor on this, that it should be, that the citizens agree that the council should be paid, but the council should do the work on it, and they should determine what communities with population and industry our size, where the council people are taking the same amount of time, what they're getting paid for, or what kind of a, maybe not a salary, but a stipend, if, whatever you wanna call it. But I do think the onus is on the council on this one.
I tell you what, we're not talking about that direct topic. That's point 2. But I'd like to stop and shift to that, which is the mandate that the council have an expressed meeting annually, which is the second point, because the first and second point can be mutually exclusive. So how about, since we seem to have a direction going in that, how about we shift to that one for a second, and we'll get back to point 1. Does anyone here have a problem with us including a mandate? Because we say the council may determine the compensation of council members by ordinance. Should we change that to be a mandate that they are to meet annually prior to July 1 to deal with that issue?
Did you not propose that language, Jonathan?
I'm sorry.
The mandated meeting?
Yes, the language is it will be on an agenda, it will annually be on an agenda.
Shall.
Yeah.
Yes.
It says on at least an annual basis shall be placed upon an agenda and discussed. Now, Mr. Wiggins,
Would you read that last line? Shall be placed on an agenda and discussed?
by the council at a work session to determine the need for any alterations.
Okay. So it says and discussed, not could be discussed, but and discussed, right? I just
Well-
wanna make sure, cause that's one of my issues is anything can be placed on an agenda. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you can say, I'm not gonna talk about that. Well, if you say and it has to be discussed, maybe I'm just overthinking it, but, cause my thought behind this was this forces, our original idea was that it forces a pay raise. And those 50% of the council people who are opposed to it, we should do this for free. Those people are required to take it, and they can be like, well, it's in the charter, I can't do anything about it. And the other 50% that say, well, we're 20 years behind the times, at least this is doing something. So I like the idea of it being on an agenda, but it's required to be discussed, not somebody, and you know, this also, I guess maybe we run into an issue of those 4 people who don't think people should be paid on the council, they just don't show up to that work session, and then you have that issue too. But
Well, factually, there are only 2 council members that even speak negatively about
that's
this.
fine. I just was
And
using
both
that as a
have-
hypothetical.
And here's the key, well, I personally support the idea of a mandatory meeting as well. Please understand that even the inclusion of this language, it gets us to the table, but does not actually address the problem at all.
Yeah, that's what I have a problem
The
with.
2 council members who have vocally spoken in opposition of our review have said, you can put it on the agenda, you can say we have to discuss it, and we're still gonna not discuss it. We don't want it. One of them says, I shouldn't even be paid. They have already taken a position that you can put it on the agenda, they don't have to vote, they can vote no, they'll just always vote no.
Right.
There's so there's no discussion.
Are they new people?
Well, I don't wanna, I've already
Guys wanna out
indicated that there
anybody?
are 2. You can go back to a 4-year ago work session.
I was gonna say, you can watch work sessions, you can listen to the.
But the
audio.
point
It's pretty
is
obviously some of
it,
them are.
you can sit here and say, if we take this to the voters, and the voters may approve this, and I'm not opposed to this language, understanding that we put this before the voters, if 8 councilmen walk into a room and go, okay, we're here for our mandatory thing, mayor calls the work session, says our first point is compensation, and all 8 go, we don't know what the hell to do, so let's not do anything. You're still in the
We
exact
can't
same
save you
position
from
you are today.
yourselves. I mean, seriously, we can't save you from yourselves. I mean, if the
Exactly.
citizens say that this is how we want the process to work, and the city council all pushes back from the table because
That's what
nobody
they-
wants to come away with dirty hands as they think it's gonna be, That's the council's issue, but the process has to be the process.
Well, I agree, and that's why I'm saying I'm fine putting it in. I just know at least the current makeup of the council, we may get to an increase, we may not, I don't know, I can't speak to that directly. But I can say historically that this will kick the can further down the road with no changes.
Let me ask you this.
Because people have vocalized they're too scared of being the council that makes the first step. Nobody wants to be the first guy to walk through the room.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
how does this change, you said the fact that 2 council members have said they wouldn't vote for it and different things, how does that change any other thing that comes before the council? The council has very definite ideas, at least certain members do, of the different things that they want to see done, and they're willing to fight for it. And there's others that don't want it done, so they're fight for it. But in the process of the council making those decisions, then you get, if they say no, that's fine, because the council has the right to always change anything that they want. That's why they're on the council. They have to do it by due process. But I was wondering how does this conflict with the state statute when it specifically says they have to take one year and one another year? Have we completely changed the way in which we were doing that?
Well, being a charter city, we are allowed to set our compensation.
The only limitation is that an elected official cannot vote to increase their pay
Correct.
during their term. So no vote can occur, or no increase in pay can occur during the term of an elected official.
And that is what we have.
Yeah.
And that's
We-
always
we
the
maintain
sticking
that.
point. Isn't that always the sticking point, that the council is not paid equally each year? Some are getting an increase and some are not, and that has always been a sticking point.
It's not.
I don't believe that's correct, Ms. Eubank.
No, I've got years behind me that says that's one of the reasons why it hasn't gone up very much. And like you were correct, if you're going to serve on the council, you've got to be prepared to make the hard decisions as well as the easy ones.
That's right.
And we're just trying to make it so that this hard decision is easy. However, I have noticed in the years that some people will come to the council and they've never even opened up their packet until they get there that night. Others have studied it and researched it and know what they're talking about. So I think a lot of it depends upon the individual, and there's no way you're gonna be able to legislate good quality.
Fair enough, and I will point out that we do not independently define compensation. One of the biggest debates that has occurred between council members is we have certain council members, as you point out, that are very active. And that 300 and, after taxes, $304 or whatever it amounts to, when over half of my compensation goes to just paying for expenses, I'm not really getting paid a salary. I'm getting reimbursed expenses
Right.
for what I do. Other council members who are not as active have fewer expenses, and therefore the money is just kind of brought in as gain. That's something that the council needs to figure out. How do they want to define that? That is part of the debate of this, because I think if you took the debate to that level, people would see things differently. Because when you think of this as salary, how much do you work, how much do you get paid? But when you go, oh, wait a second, you gotta take your hard expenses out first. I mean, respectfully, I've been very open to pointing out that I make roughly $4 an hour as a council member, which is below minimum wage. And if you exclude out the fact that I can't practice in the municipal court where I was making $150 an hour, I could lose thousands. I've lost huge chunks of money serving on here, and I'm completely comfortable with that. And I'm not complaining about money. But we have some members here that you could almost argue make $30 to $40 an hour because of how little time they spent, if you valued only time. And so the problem is if we do that, then we change compensation discussion, it grows like branches on a tree. The issue we have before the charter is the charter mandating that the council do something. That's what we're here to address, not the subsequent discussions and the effects afterward. I tell you what, because we gotta keep this moving along, I will go ahead and make a motion that we we add the language and we make the adjustment on at least an annual, this should go, we have our recommendation where, Mr. Zer, we have the council may determine the compensation of council members by ordinance, and then it stops. We can add on at least an annual basis, comma, the compensation of council members shall be placed upon an agenda and discussed by council at a work session to determine the need for any alterations, period, which is the staff's recommended sentence there.
You're,
Would that be in conflict?
you're looking at also making sure to keep in there that no compensation change shall occur during the term.
Yes.
Shall become
Yes.
effective for a council member until the council commencement of his or her next term.
Well, technically, that is in our existing subsequent paragraph that we'll get to after that.
Right.
Either way, that sentence has to be included.
Your motion is not to remove any of that.
Right.
Couldn't we add something to, saying, after consultation with the mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee?
No, that, my motion is not gonna include that, ma'am, for the following reason. Since we're already mandating that it goes on the agenda, we have already, in a separate section of our charter, allow the mayor to create a board or commission to do the city business. And I have every expectation the gentleman behind me has already thought about the ability to do that. And so you've more than communicated your point. I don't want it in the charter, especially because then we'd have to define blue ribbon and all that. Your point is made.
Very
Your
well
point is
said.
made.
Stephanie.
Okay,
Do you want to see what he's
Yes.
proposing there?
if you look on this solid paragraph, the fourth line starts with the sentence starts with
If
on
we
at
didn't get
least.
paid, we wouldn't worry about it.
So, so for the sake of addressing the second issue of the council dealing with the required meeting, my motion is suggesting that that addresses that issue. And I believe we can address that issue in and of itself.
I second that motion.
What's the purpose
Okay.
of the compensation?
So, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Who was the second, I'm sorry?
Tim was.
Mr.
Thank
Stidham.
you.
Any further discussion on the mandatory, or on at least an annual basis? Because in theory, we could do it twice in a calendar year. No discussion, all in favor? Passes unanimously. We will incorporate that as an amendment to our review. Okay.
So did we touch on all the 3 points?
We have
That's
not.
one, that's
That
number
is
two.
just the second
Okay,
one
so we skipped up, that's
of
right.
three.
Just wanted to make sure I was getting my-
Because I am going to exercise at least a little discretion as the charter chair, I'm gonna ask we go to the third point, just to distance our argument a little bit, so we don't repeat so much. The third issue was regarding the proration issue of compensation. And I believe that is, if you look on page 9, at the very top of page 9, the last bolded paragraph.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make it clear, I'm not opposed to increases or anything. I'm just trying to act as the devil's advocate to make us think about what it is we're really trying to accomplish.
Ms. Hubach, you do not need to explain yourself, you are always of value here, so we're good. Okay, so, staff,
Actually, staff clarification question.
yes.
Because we entered into all of this discussing sections 3.3 and 4.3 because they mirror each other.
For clarification, the motion would apply to both sections.
Thank you, sir.
But I will now turn back to staff, though, on the issue of the proration. The way it was presented to me was asking that this, and I don't want to say it, please make it better defined, but asking, is this the best definition to communicate this? And is there any concern that you see with this?
And I assume that we are talking about the paragraph compensation shall begin the day of the administration of the oath of office, prorated by day for the month, and shall cease on the date of resignation, removal from office, or expiration of term prorated by day for the month.
I did not have any recommended changes with regard to that, and I would note that.
And I nor the council members spoke of that. But
Okay.
we felt like that was a legitimate
Okay,
insertion.
okay. Well, then, since, well, no, respectfully, the issue was raised. Does anyone on the council have any comments or thoughts on that issue?
I think it's nice and clear.
Okay, seeing that we may not need to actually have a motion on that issue, we'll deem number 3 determined, and then move back to number 1. Okay, so we have already motioned to add the mandatory annual meeting, that the council deal with this. The question becomes, and I'm hesitant to phrase it this way, but since there has been some discussion that there is a question of faith that the council can adequately resolve this issue, should the citizens have the ability to mandate that there should at least be, if no determination was made at that annual meeting, that a cost of living adjustment equal to
No.
CPI go into effect? The effect of this is, in the 20 years since the standard adjustment that staff would have had taken place, would have increased compensation for the council between $160 and $200 over a 20-year period of time. So instead of $350, it would be approximately $500 to $550
Per month?
per month. If the CPI would have just kicked in, if this would have been in effect back in 1998.
Just for
Mr. Schultz.
clarification, part on our side for staff, you're looking at it from the perspective of, your motion was to include for both council and mayor compensation, the reference that there be an inclusion of an annual review of it be placed on the council agenda, is that correct?
Yes.
And now this discussion, you're going to be evaluating whether or not you remove the following paragraph portion that talks about the CPI.
That's correct.
Okay.
And if we remove that paragraph, we will only remove part of it, because we are required to mandate, in no event shall any ordinance or automatic increase become effective for council member until the commencement of his or her.
That's correct, and
So,
that needs to stay in there for constitutional
That is
purposes.
correct.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Have we ever tied in the compensation in with attendance? In other
No.
words, it's well and good to give somebody a raise, but if they're not going to attend any of the meetings, some of the councils do that, they tie it in, the attendance is tied in with the amount of money that they get.
And that is a wonderful section for another issue when we get to meeting attendance.
Okay, I just
So,
think about it.
dealing with, this really is, and I'll just say, this is, I'm one of the ones who was the strongest to push this. To push to add an automatic adjustment on an annual basis if the council did not make an adjustment. My rationale that I expressed before for clarification was, one, it allows the council to not always feel that they have to do an increase. Because at some point it does look bad if you're giving yourself a pay raise every year. And it would, to even make, because right now a CPI increase for a council member would be approximately $7
Per month.
per month, which there's a certain argument to say that's a nominal or de minimis amount.
So would you be trying to be like matching what the federal government gets in the raise?
And really what, a lot of times similar to what our staff is allocated.
The Rocky Mountain Plains State CPI, May to May, is 1.4% for all urban consumers. That'd be about $3.40.
Yeah, that's about right, what the federal employees get, yeah.
It's 1.1,
1.4%.
so it'd be almost $4.
Yeah,
So,
your
so,
salary goes up and your insurance goes higher.
right,
Sure.
yes, please.
And that goes back to my argument about the one or the other. I don't think both items need to be in place there. I think you're just gonna confuse the voters on the topic. And if you're concerned about the two individuals that are always against a raise, they're gonna be against that portion, and you're gonna have some outward pushback on the items to be proposed on the ballot, because there is an automatic raise in there. I think it just keeps it cleaner. If it becomes the total onus of the council to make that determination. As Tim said, we can't save you from yourselves, we need to own it. And I think we can articulate it. I think an outside election officials pay review committee could come in and do a wonderful job of showing, throwing out all of the facts and figures that the council could consider. And at that time, if it's a 6-2 vote, it's a 6-2 vote. If it's a 5-3 vote, it's a 5-3 vote. I mean, it dies or lives on its own merits. I just don't think the CPI is worthy of inclusion in that argument, because then it just gets in the way of the whole process. And I
Mr.
would
Mayor,
ask the board.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
When you're talking about an outside group, I'm not wanting to have consultants come in and tell
No,
us what.
you can-
I'm wanting the
Right.
citizens of Raymore to say what they were willing to pay for their city council.
But doesn't the council have the authority at this meeting to ask the mayor to form a council, or on their own choose people to be a part of a pay study or something like that?
The staff can put the information together. The mayor can appoint a committee, that can be approved by the council for purposes of studying that, absolutely.
I say this slightly in jest, since it seems like this is a debate between the mayor and ITU.
Yeah.
I will offer a counterpoint to the mayor's point, because I respect the council, the mayor's position on this. It would simplify things to remove this, absolutely. And in principle, I actually agree with that. In application, it's absolutely false, because for 20 years, that same principle has been in place, and it's not been done. And in fact, the last two mayors took the public stance that, and in fact, in '07, it was vetoed. So even when the council votes a raise in, the mayor has vetoed it. And our previous mayor specifically said, that's why it killed our last three proposals, because the previous mayor vetoed it. Now, would never ask the mayor to have to go on record as to say what his position would be, but since we as a charter are looking at the next 10 years, while I would love to have our current mayor stay our mayor for the next 10 years, what if that changes? And the dilemma that we face is every year we could change up to 60% of our council, because some years you could change the mayor as well as 4 council members. So we see new makeups of this argument. So while right now there are only 2 people who have advocated negatively, that does not mean that we will always have 6 in favor. And in fact, some years it could flip the other direction.
If you had 6 in favor, this wouldn't be such an intense discussion right here.
Well, but the problem is we had 6 in favor in '07, and we had 6 in favor in 4 years of 2013. But when the mayor says they're vetoing it, or specifically veto it, then it doesn't matter.
What do you have to override the veto?
They didn't override.
Well, it
6.
didn't override in '07, and we were not sure whether it would override in '13. And so the problem is you see, you're now making the point that negates the argument, and that is you drive politics back into the discussion, and you drive the individuals at play back into the discussion. When you get the gamesmanship of that now basically do the citizens get their representatives compensated appropriately, and do we see another 10-year stall?
How do you word that? How do you put this in language? What would the language look like? Because if we don't allow the council to do it, we're gonna fall back on the auto adjust the CPI?
That's what he's saying.
Yeah. Forces them to take
I
a
don't think
raise.
that floats.
The voter shall be asked,
To
shall
follow
the
the
charter
CPI?
be amended to identify the commencement of compensation for council members upon the administration of their oath of office and termination of compensation at their resignation, removal, expiration, okay, that's
It's
not,
on
sorry.
proration.
I am you're right, thank you. Allow for increases in the compensation of the mayor and council members by ordinance, or automatically on an annual basis pursuant to the CPI to become effective for the mayor and each council member at the commencement of his or her next term. That's what the voters
That's what they would
will
read on the ballot.
decide.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
think that the state statute for fourth-class cities, we're not there now, but doesn't it actually set in the state statute the salary that the fourth-class city people get? I think that one of them is, it's either second,
We're not.
third, or the fourth-class cities. The state mandates exactly what their salary's gonna be. Is there any possibility they might come in and do the same for the higher charters?
Well, we're a charter city, so it actually, it is
Whatever's the
for the
charter.
vote of the citizens to determine,
As long as it doesn't violate state
as
statutes.
long as it
state
does not
constitution.
violate state statute.
Which
But
right
the
now-
state will not come in and tell us what to pay our representatives.
Just wanna make sure we don't get caught.
Well, other thoughts. We have other members who have not spoken on this, if you'd like to. I will respect, and again, because I wanna be very respectful about this. There have been very good points brought up on both sides. Even though I am advocating one of them, I am respecting both sides. What we are faced procedurally is to discuss this and to vote whether we wish to amend. Because we already have an existing recommendation. Do we wish to amend our recommendation or present back to the council?
Would you read that again and then let us
Excluding
vote?
it. Yes. Do we amend to exclude the paragraph regarding the consumer price index adjustment? Or do we maintain the existing recommendation? And I'm not trying to shut discussion off. But I did want to at least calibrate as to what we would be leading to a vote on, Mr. Stidham.
I would make a motion to amend it by exclusion of the CPI paragraph.
I think you already have a motion.
No, I
No,
did not.
I did not.
In this instance, I allowed for debate prior to a motion.
I second it.
So, okay, so we have a motion and a second, and for clarification, the removal would not be of the last sentence regarding the audit, because that is state statute required. So only the first part of that last paragraph on page 8 and the corresponding paragraph in section 5C, I believe. That's correct.
So we would retain council member until commencement of, shall not become effective until commencement of his or her next office, term of
Yes.
office. Okay.
And for clarification, we still have the requirement of an annual agenda
Yes.
and discussion.
That is
Okay,
correct.
Just wanted to make that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion specific to the motion?
I just can't really come to it. I mean, the whole idea for putting this in here was to force them to take, even if it's $3.47 a month, it forces them to take a raise, which,
We
Yeah.
have to let them decide. and-
right, which is
and-
But
their
the
job,
issue-
and that's their
Like
job
Tim
is to
said.
determine.
The issue is strategy. If you have ballot language that says, do we give them the power of raising their salaries X amount a month? Or if we don't, we're gonna fall back and we can't say that we're not giving them an increase because they're gonna get the auto CPI anyway.
Right,
So if
It's
you've
a
got a yes or
scapegoat.
no vote for it, it is.
yeah, it allows people to.
Mhm.
But the other alternative is that for another 20 years, there's never a raise at all, which is the problem.
But
I'm
that's
just,
not
I'm
our
just trying to
issue.
play. No, I know
And
that.
I'm willing to acknowledge
Right.
that is an expected outcome.
Right.
But there may be councils that do step up. I mean,
Sure.
I talk about principle and application. Sometimes principles get honored, so, I mean,
Yeah.
The charter
No, it's
will
just
be reviewed in another 10 years.
Right, but that's what I'm just saying. It's. I get the point of it's a scapegoat because then people are like, oh well, I don't have to discuss it at the annual meeting because we're gonna get that 1.4% or whatever. But at the same time, by not having it in there, it's gonna be on the annual discussion, and they're still gonna sit on their thumbs.
Got to do it.
It kind of puts
They
the
have to
monkey
do
on
it.
their back,
Yep.
lets them have to make the
No, I know.
decision.
but
That's why I'm just
I
sitting
do
on the
have-
fence.
And this is an open-ended question. how is this putting a burden on the council member? How are they being relieved of accountability because of a $4 increase?
Well, they have to make the decision whether they want the raise or not.
Well, but remember, that's not what we voted on before. We voted on just putting the discussion on the agenda. We didn't discuss what goes into that discussion.
Well, now, hold on, you're confusing, I think you're confusing us here.
Well, go ahead.
All of this is being voted on to put on an agenda.
That was a
And a
separate
ballot.
motion that we, an amendment
Absolutely,
that we made.
that's what I wanna make
To
sure.
put it on the agenda, but
Now-
not to actually dictate what the discussion is.
No, we can't dictate the discussion.
Discussion
You
could
take
be
care of the
called just to
discussion.
have no discussion.
Here's the deal. The ballot language will be very specific. There's a very specific tone and reason for this meeting. If the city council has to be told how to operate that meeting, that's not our issue. If they can't figure it out, and, you know, I think a lot of this is just, it's common sense. I don't think I'm not gonna be confused by the what ifs and the other sides of things. We need to go one or the other on this. And we've already agreed that we're going to turn this and put it in the hands of the council. At least put that out to the voters. And
what I'm saying, Mr. Stidham, is actually that's not what, putting it on the agenda to have a discussion is not actually putting it for the
specific to
council
budget.
to
And
vote on.
again,
Because a work session, by the way, is also not a vote.
understand that.
So it's
Understand.
literally just we've met our statutory requirement to get together to have a discussion, and looking around the table, I see none moving on to the next item on the agenda. So it's not actually, so I mean, I'm the one that wanted the annual review, absolutely, I agreed with everybody's rationale. But I do think we have to be careful to understand what we voted on. We did not vote to take to the voters that the council determine their pay every year, only that they have a discussion to possibly change it.
That's right.
So, and that's a completely different context.
So would that voting be done in that room or an executive session?
It would be no
Neither.
vote, because a work session is not a vote.
Work session.
No, I'm not talking about work session, I'm talking about up on, during a regular.
Well,
They
work
wouldn't-
sessions
they
are
wouldn't be
filmed
there.
too.
Regular meeting.
They're filmed,
Yeah.
yes, they are,
But it's not an
there is
actual
there's
vote.
nothing
No,
on
there's
the
no vote
dice.
in a work session.
It's an opportunity for the council to ask staff questions and for the staff to present information regarding
I'm
an
not
issue.
talking about work session,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
talking about when you're having a council meeting, is that when you would vote on it?
No, because there's nothing that we have discussed that makes us have to talk about it on the dais. There is no vote.
That's, yeah.
May I clarify?
Please.
We don't have to
So,
bring anything
a
up.
work session would be an opportunity for them to discuss it in the council chambers, but not an actual meeting where votes are taking place. That would be an opportunity for them to ask staff questions, for them to receive a staff report, and at the conclusion of the work session, there would be not a vote, but a consensus and direction provided for staff to include at a later time on an actual council meeting, if in fact there was going to be a change. If they concluded at the conclusion of the work session that, hey, there's no change that's required here at this particular time, we don't want anything further, they have complied with the provisions of the proposed amended charter by discussing it at a work session and having it on a work session agenda. If they made a determination that they wanted to alter it or make a change to their pay, they would staff would receive instruction to include it on a next agenda for an actual action meeting, a regular city council meeting, where they would then have an opportunity to vote on it by ordinance, first and second vote. Okay.
Could you add something that might say every 3 years or every 4 years, they are required to at least discuss it? They don't have to discuss it every year, but maybe every 4 or 5 years, 3 years, put a time limit, that they must at least discuss it. We're
Well,
not
we
asking them to
voted.
pass anything.
The
we're asking them
the
to
recommendation and the vote was for an annual review.
Annual review.
Now, again, playing out the express instruction of our language, they are only required to have it on a work session agenda, and if no council member wishes to ask any questions of staff and no guidance is given, the issue just fades away for another year.
I like that.
That's correct.
So there is, so, but, and that's why I only want to clarify, the voters are not voting to make the council deal with the issue of compensation every year.
So when this evaluation is done, who's doing the evaluation of the council members?
Well, staff in the work session would typically give an informative instruction or some information, not necessarily a recommendation. We have mentioned, and there's the possibility the mayor could call for a citizens group to gather to come up with that, but that's subjective to each mayor. Right now, I can't speak to the current mayor. Our last two mayors would have rejected that discussion and said, no, I'll veto any discussion, not have a group. So the compensation issue is not being resolved entirely. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Ackland?
No, I just want to make sure that I understood if they have, in this work session, they decide they're doing absolutely nothing, the CPI kicks in, help me understand, that?
That's
No,
if
the motion takes
if the existing recommendation by the charter stays, that would occur.
Oh, okay.
If the motion on the table passes,
Okay.
then we will be removing
We will
that
remove the
component,
CPI.
and then
I
the
got it.
issue is not addressed.
I'm with you, okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Okay, all opposed? Motion passes, it's removed.
Did Ms. Schubach vote?
No.
Ms.
Chairman?
Schubach voted no.
Oh,
Okay,
And so they do.
we are removing that paragraph and
From both mayor and
from
council.
both 3B and 5, I believe, C, with the exception of the last sentence, the statutory language. All right, okay, so we have gone through council pay. Now we are moving on to item 3. Forfeit, this is the meeting attendance. There is a kind of a, we have been asked to, one of the issues I will say that came up that immediately, disregarding what I've been presented, that I immediately caught, that I felt was an issue of concern, was defining regular meetings and special meetings. Because there was some ambiguity to that when we did not specify. The rationale that we gave was that when there is a meeting where the council calls itself, has an agenda, calls the official meeting, that we talked about the fact that 10 years ago, we were half the population, council met twice a month, now we meet literally 5 times a month. 10 years from now, when there's 30,000 people, we may be meeting 2 days a week. At some point, there's going to reach, and we see a little of this now, but we would see this in greater proportion later. If there's the council runs at the speed of the slowest car. It's like the train always runs at the speed of the caboose. So the idea is if you have council members who are underprepared, because they have literally missed 25% of everything, are they really prepared to step up and address the complexities of issues that we haven't had in the past? And so with that being said, there was a recommendation of us to acknowledge that there is the 25% that they cannot miss. And I believe staff, what's the section that we're in the charter?
You're looking under page 10 of your proposed recommended changes, and it's going to be section D. And look about halfway down, you'll see 5.
Boy.
So we need to define regular meetings.
Right, so the
Yes.
language that had been
Yes.
presented was, fails to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings of the council or more than 25% of the council's regular meetings and work sessions during a 12-month period without being excused by the council. That's what has been currently proposed, and during the discussions with the council, I heard two individual recommendations. There was some recommendation from the mayor and a consideration of a certain number of meetings, and one of the council members made a suggestion that it be identified as posted meetings. So I will let the.
Yeah, no, I think if I could, please, yeah, that was, when we got to thinking about and work sessions and the 25%, there would be close to 4 months of meetings that one could miss and still be on the city council, if you combined work sessions and regular meetings. And so I had asked for to separate those with an or statement rather than an and statement, so that in some language that the 25% back to hard numbers, so that would be 6 regular meetings and 8 work sessions, which basically comes out to 25% of each of those categories of meetings, so that there would be an or statement that if you miss 6 regular meetings or 8 work sessions, then removal would be considered at that time. As it is, if you're excused, and many usually are, as we have 2 council members from the other night were missing, they had also asked for excuses to be gone. Those types of numbers would not be assessed in this case. We're talking about someone who would be incapacitated or just ambivalent to even serving on the council and just wanting to get a check or whatever. So that's why I felt like the 25% of the total number, if we're meeting once a week, that's 52 meetings. 25% of that means that they could miss 12 to 14 meetings in a row and still be on the council. That's all right. So that's why I'm saying that we need to have at least some hard number in there with an or statement between the two. Because they both are important meetings, but I think there's more weightedness to the regular meetings, because that's where the actual legislation of government is occurring. The other is just discussion and information meeting.
Mr. Wiggins?
Tying kind of both of your guys' comments together, wouldn't that potentially run into an issue of when we have 30,000 people, what if we have regular meetings every single Tuesday and Thursday and work sessions every Monday and Friday? Well, now all of a sudden we have 8 times 12 is 96 meetings, and if we leave the number at 6, maybe what if we got to a point where we had council meetings 5 days a week? We went to a full-time council, we had a meeting every day, 6 days, missing 6 days out of the year is out of 52 times 5. I just worry that is a hard, fast number. Percentages are nice because as the city grows, if the meeting needs grow, that grows with the number of meetings that we have. Because if we ran to, not that it's likely to happen, but if we ran to a full-time council that are getting paid $4 an hour, then all of a sudden, 6 meetings based on 2 meetings a month is different.
If I could, please. I don't know that that's a really good argument to make, though. But I worked for communities that have had 2,500 people, and I worked for a community that had 55,000 people. Sure. The same number of meetings occurred in both jurisdictions. Okay. It is not the number of people that are in a community that might create, unless you're in like a city of Kansas City, even they meet on like a weekly basis. Sure. Rather than a daily basis. They may have committee meetings and such on a regular basis, but I mean their actual legislative efforts occur bi-weekly. And so I don't know that that's a really good argument that we're preparing for advancement of the size of our city. We could triple in size and still be meeting twice a month, regular meetings. We're only required by statute to meet once a month. Right. And so
it was just a hypothetical of,
sure.
It would, if we determined a 10%.
Staff's gonna be busier.
Yeah, if we determined what a better percentage number would look like. Cause I just on the off chance that it was all just hypothetical.
And the recommendation is discuss the issue of the entire section, not a specific proposal.
Sure.
So
Sure.
we're not limited. An example of specific days is an example given. It is not the recommendation in and of itself. We can consider it, but we are not limited to that.
How many committee meetings, and I don't have any idea, so I'm asking you, how many committee meetings do different council members attend, aside from the work session and the Monday night meetings?
When you say committee meetings, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there's a budget committee. How many
All the
additional?
council attends all the
Okay.
budget meetings.
Okay.
We really don't have, we've had, in the last 3 years, we've had 2 subcommittees that formed for specific need. One was for an art feature recommendation, the other one was for an evaluation process to be done regarding a staff member. And those meetings typically were like once a month, once every other month. The one for the evaluation only met like 3 times. Not a lot of those types of special meetings.
So basically, what we're looking here is just the Monday night meetings and work sessions.
We do have actually, maybe Mr. Fairborn can give us some specifics on this. I know that we have a couple of special work sessions. We've started using our 5th Mondays when there's a 5th Monday generally during the budget period of time, where there's typically a Saturday morning, or I think last year we did it in the evening, where there was a special allocated meeting. We've even had some executive sessions on litigation and some other, I think some property acquisition issues. So, and those are kind of sparse. They may happen 2-3 times a year on a need basis.
But it is a busy council schedule compared to even 5 years ago. But as a matter of fact, the council the council has passed a resolution that there are actually only ad hoc committees. There will be no standing committees. And part of that is because the entire council is present for so much now.
Now, for purposes of what's happening in addition to what's happening here in City Hall, you know, I serve on a couple of Mid-America Regional Council as mayor. I serve on a couple of those, and they meet monthly. I know that Derek serves on Missouri Municipal League, and that meets on a regular basis as well, and that's as his function as a city council member of this community. So there are outside responsibilities that do draw us away to those meetings, but as far as the actual committed meetings for good government here within the city, that's what Mr. Fearborn.
Okay.
I do want to say and express some concern about how we look at, and I have no specific recommendation regarding regular, our dais meetings or public meetings. We call them in our work sessions. And the reason being is it's very difficult to determine which is more important than the other. And while the voting has a very definitive legislative value, the problem that we get is the only times we ever have problems are not the voting, it's when the people didn't attend the work sessions and got up there and voted and went, oh crap, I meant to go the other way, I wasn't there, I didn't listen to anything, I didn't read the packet, I just voted. We had just within the last calendar year, we had a member who did not attend work sessions that showed up. And if you read our agendas for the meetings, normally under each item, there's about a 4-line kind of brief description. And the questions asked of the council member to staff, literally I'm watching the staff member when I hear things like, well, what's the effect on that? And they literally look down and it's read right in front of them. You're not even reading the 3-page agenda we put before you. I mean, what is your vote worth? And but to show up and just be the warm body that raises the hand, substantively, that's the least important. Legislatively, it's the most because the vote has to count, quorum, etc. But substantively, it's the least. It's the work session where we get all our information. Rarely do we ever have a true epiphany when we get to the actual vote. And that's why you see a lot of the votes that are 8-0, 7-1, you know, because typically the substantive discussions long occurred. So I want to throw that out politely to confuse us, but only to say that the reason why, when we discussed this earlier, was we said 25%. It's because both meetings have value. Different value, but both have value. But in totality, if you're missing 25% of your job, are you doing your job? And the one thing we've stressed is, and I'll I'll kind of channel Ms. Hubach for a moment, is who's our boss? When you're an elected official or a staff member, who's the first person at the top of the chain? It's the residents. And if they elect you and you don't show up for 25% of the work of whatever level, you knew you had regular sessions and work sessions when you ran for office. To not show up to 25% is not doing your job.
When people start to notice.
And they do notice, and so do we codify this as a statement of the citizens, that the citizens say, we want you at 75% or more of the regular and work sessions? Or do we, now, I'm not saying an unsound argument to split the difference, but yet, how do we feel?
Now, I did hear somebody said, what if they're called to military duty? I heard that in the discussion, I listened to the work session.
Yes, and that was a very good question raised. I do believe that we do have, it does say without being excused. And that made me wonder whether or not we needed to make a statement like that where it is instructed that active military service would be an excuse.
Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act, I think, would provide cover for that one.
So we already have a statutory cover for it in the
Federal
state.
level, yes.
Federal,
Yes.
feeding down through the state. So, but that was a concern that I caught on that too. The other thing that I was concerned about was when we talk about regular meetings, my common sense regular meeting is the ones, again, we're on the dais and we vote. But technically, any meeting that we have an agenda that we list publicly, that we take minutes on, doesn't have to be up there, is a meeting. Do we count those? For example, special meetings, executive sessions. Yes, yes. And should those be included? And in
I'm sorry, I didn't.
the Centerview, when we had the ribbon cutting,
That was a
Anywhere-
posted meeting.
Anywhere that a quorum of the council will be present, that we are aware of in advance, we will post the meeting up front, so everyone knows that it's a public meeting. No transaction of business occurred at that actual meeting, but because we had a quorum of council members, we posted on the front door.
As an example, there is a groundbreaking next Tuesday at 4:30. That is a regular meeting of the council because it is posted.
and I would even defend that argument by saying those are not as substantive, they're somewhat ceremonial, while they would meet a potential definition, that's of concern. Because when I talk and advocate the value and substance of the city business, it's not quite rising to the level of a work session or when you're on the dais voting.
Right.
And I would agree, maybe there needs to be some clarification on meetings that are outside of those. Thoughts?
I got my foot cold.
Oh.
Again, we have no motion on the table, so open discussion on these thoughts. Mr. Mayor, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think just striking the word and putting in the word or fixes that potential problem on page 10. I just don't think that 25% should be applied to the entirety of those meetings, or the combination of those meetings, because they're both important to the community and to the good order of business. I just think the word or clears that up instead of the word and, so that 3 consecutive regular meetings of the council, or more than 25% of the council's regular meetings and work sessions during, or work sessions during any 12 months, so that 3 regular council meetings. Council meetings are the important ones that we'd be at. Work sessions, it's a preparatory status that if they don't make it to those, I think can be the next guy's argument that I should be the new council member, because this guy's not making a work session. I mean, I just think the word or clears it up.
Mr. Wiggins?
Just for clarification, in my mind, when I hear 25% and regular and work sessions, it's 25% of the combined sessions. If I hear or, I interpret it as 25% of
Yes.
the regular sessions or 25%. So I can miss 24% of this one and 20. I'm
It's still the
trying to
same
split hairs.
thing.
I know,
But
that's what I'm
it's
thinking.
still the
It's,
same.
It's not, and that's the key.
that's what I'm wondering is from the
I'm-
math.
I'm agreeing, I caught that as well, because actually the proposed language is actually more cooperative to council members. Because here's the key, 25% of the cumulative, you could miss a lot of work sessions, but as long as you meet 75% of the joint combined.
Right.
But here's the key, what if a council member misses 26% of the work sessions? The or actually makes two independent 25% categories that you could fall.
Yeah, I just wanna make
It
sure.
could-
That's why I
It could
proposed the
hurt your
hard numbers
works.
too, though,
So,
the
so,
68.
so by, and the hard numbers may clarify that, but the use of the language or there actually is more penalizing to the council
Okay,
member.
that's just what I
They have
wanted
to
to-
attend more, because the joint number allows you to slightly miss more of the other, but the
Right.
totality picks it up and saves them, Mr. Zerm.
I would simply note in there that you're not removing any reference that all of those meetings could be excused absences for them.
That is correct.
So it's, yes, you've got your attendance requirements, but if there's a reason that they have missed,
Sure.
they can always request that that be an excused absence.
Of course.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And the suggestion of change does not deal with the first line of the failing to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings of the council. Only the totality of the work sessions and the regular sessions. So, politely put, remember, I'm the one that's being hardest on this. I like the or language as proposed by the mayor, because it makes my point better.
Yeah, I want to make people accountable for being a thing, so I agree, I like the or, so.
Just so I understand, the or makes you more accountable, attending more.
You have to attend more. Because you have the ability with the existing language to miss more than 25% of either the regular sessions or the work sessions, as long as you make up by over-attending on the other. But if you do the or, you're evaluated on both lines.
Well, one of the things that some of the charter cities did, they put a value on each meeting, like the work session having maybe a different value than what the regular meeting would be. And then they put it in, and if you missed that meeting, you didn't get paid that month, or that week, whatever it is. So that you didn't have to worry about it being 25% or 26. If there were 10 meetings and you missed 10 meetings, you didn't get paid for 10 meetings. I'm just throwing this in.
Ms. Hubach, I can only say, and I probably should not make this remark in light of our earlier vote, I would love to see that, because what you would end up finding is there would be a lot of council members voting for pay raises because of the fact that the ones that are the most complaining are the ones that miss the most meetings and wouldn't be paid. So, I like your train of thought, Ms. Hubach. You still provide value to the council.
Well then,
So, with that being said, Mr. Wiggins.
I would like to make a motion, section 3.7B, paragraph 5, to make a change, where we added the and work sessions, to change it to or work sessions.
I'll second the motion.
Agree.
Any further discussion?
Any question?
Question has been moved. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Okay, moving to the number 4, section 10.3 on recall.
During the work session, I heard one man say, I think you should throw that out.
Well, I tell you what, there was somebody that suggested that, but I am going to make a motion, since I was the strongest advocate on this point, but I am going to do so exercising some discretion as the chair to opine a little bit, to explain my motion. And that is, as I sat and discussed with the individual who even expressed any opposition to this that showed up from the public, who has admitted that he did that in jest, and everybody has now taken his joke so seriously, is that actually, I'm going to motion that we remove this from our review. The problem is the greater issue was discovered. People are confused. They're not seeing the value of the concern, and therefore, it will confuse voters. This is an issue that is not highly, even I'm the one who's expressing the concern, I don't see a high likelihood of this applying. In a rare instance, if it did, it would be unbelievably difficult. But I don't believe that it's highly probable. And as a result, because of the confusion, because we didn't have, when we discussed it, opposition so much as we had confusion. And the council felt the same way. Now, some people took a position, but it wasn't, the opposition was confusion. And because of that, I think it would be sound to remove it in an entirety.
The thing with the 6-month thing?
Yes. So that is my motion, to remove that from our recommendation to council.
Say, I know you would second that one.
Mr. Stidham
Matter of
dived
fact,
in.
you really kind of irritated me that you made the motion.
I stole your thunder, Mr. Stidham.
You did.
But I appreciate the thunderous second.
You did.
With that being, and any discussion?
But I
Other
am
than
that
what-
bolt of lightning hanging right up there with you.
Fair enough, fair enough. Any other discussion on that item?
So we're just gonna take.
No diagram needed.
No diagram. It is dead in the water. It will be removed in its entirety. Any,
Do the diagram, sir.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
With that,
And we need a vote.
yes. Move the question. Move the question. Okay, all in favor of its removal? It passes unanimously. Okay, item.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I did want to bring back to you the other section that I had asked you about was the percentage. I know that you voted to put in the word "or" with regard to the percentage of misses, and then go back to a hard number. Is that something that the board did not wish to review at this time?
We did not get a conclusive determination on that. We have not left item A, so we are still within the sphere of allowing some discussion on that. So backing up to make sure we do address every issue that's been presented by the council. On the issue of meeting attendance under item 3, there was the discussion, the mayor briefly spoke on the idea of a proposition of considering moving the number of absences to 6 regular meetings or 8 work sessions. That is a recommendation by the mayor. Do we wish to discuss that, or do we wish, how does the commission wish to proceed?
Well, I move that we discuss his
Okay.
proposal.
Okay, so, okay, again, staying
Second.
consistent to our rules that we have, we're not gonna make a motion yet, we're gonna have discussion first. With it being on the table, what are everybody's thoughts?
And maybe I'm just wrong in my thought or misled, but I like the percentages purely because this is a 10-year charter. If something were to change where we would increase the number of meetings for whatever purpose, whatever reason, as unlikely as it is, and I do like putting constraints on council members to make sure that they are active and involved in attending. If by chance we moved to every single Monday, even though it's not likely, but on the off chance that every single Monday became a regular meeting, every single Tuesday became a work session, we've doubled or tripled the load. And if we're limiting it to that 6 and 8 hard, fast numbers, it's just kind of, and obviously
It makes it
the
harder on the council member, really.
right, which I like, and given I realize that we have in there about being excused, so more than likely, and if somebody's not going to be a team player, then we don't really want them to be a part of the council. But I just don't know, and I'm just bringing it up for the purpose of discussion. Is does a percentage, that ebbs and flows with the need of the meetings. At the same time, what would happen if we went back to once a month meetings, which is all that's required of us? Not likely to happen. But then 6, that's half. That's 50% of the meetings. If we went to once a month, we had a regular session. instead of every other week, because that's all we're required by law to do. If we did that, now all of a sudden we're doing 50%. They're
Wouldn't-
giving them a 50%
I
excuse
think 6 is 25%.
of current. But if we moved,
Current.
if we,
Oh.
because we do 24
Yeah,
meetings, if not likely to happen, if we move to a monthly, which is all that's required of it, of our council by law, then that's all of a sudden, that's a 50% number. So it's just, I'm trying to play both sides of it. That's a hard, fast number as opposed to a percentage which ebbs and flows based on the meetings that are needed. That's my only thought behind it.
Mr. Freeborn, technically by definition, for example, when the council met to interview candidates for like prosecutor, judge, did that count as a regular
It's a
meeting?
regular meeting, sir. Or, if you, especially in that case, because those are called the special meetings, those do fall into regular meeting context. Anytime that the council is posted up, it would be a regular meeting. Now, I point out to you, sir, that the council on Monday night, the work session, one of the things that I discussed with the council last night was, this great discussion by this commission has kind of revealed a standard operating procedure, if you will, on the part of the council on how a member is actually excused. So we're gonna have to go to that. Is there maybe some wording, if you're going to keep the percentages, that the commission would want to consider where in consecutive regular meetings of the council at which there is legislation, especially when you're talking about the beginning of this, where it's 3 consecutive regular meetings, if we have a regular meeting of the council last night, and we have a groundbreaking next Tuesday, and then a special meeting called for Thursday, and somebody's on a week and a half of vacation,
That's 3
and
consecutive days.
there's no guarantee that they can be excused for that. Would the commission want to consider something like that? Because, as the mayor pointed out, one of the real hardships is a legislative issue. I mean, if legislation is being proposed where votes are being taken, that's pretty, you want to make sure that, I don't know.
Does the existing language though, at the very end, when it talks about the being excused, does that cover the first dependent clause?
I think it does.
It
So
would.
therefore, we
Yeah.
already have a mechanism in place that would allow, if we had 3 regular meetings stacked so tightly, you know, the hypothetical of a vacation, that can be excused because of the uniqueness of the time frame. That's at the discretion of the council, but it's still, all of this is, a lot of this is at the discretion of the council.
And if we can get clarifying points to the procedure by which the council would do that, and allow for it to be after the fact.
Would that be by ordinance, or would that be charter? Because the
Well,
charter
maybe-
doesn't need to
well,
say the
maybe-
rule, it may need to only reference that a rule be created by ordinance.
Or, the wording that it's excused is already in there, excused by the council. We're gonna be posing to the council that that be a consent agenda style item at the work session
I
on
see.
Monday night. And as long as that consent agenda item can be after the fact, for something like what occurs here, then, yeah, absolutely, then that language takes care of it.
Okay. So we're back to the issue of percentage versus now the current proposal was 6 regular meetings or 8 work sessions. Thoughts? Mr. Wiggins has given a position. Any other point, agreement or counterpoint?
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
If
Mr.
I
Mayor.
could, the proposal would, when you think about, when you think about the number, if we're talking about percentages, the number of meetings that occur in a year change They can change because of weather, they can change because of some catastrophic activity that has occurred and a meeting gets canceled, holidays, changes in events. So, I mean, while you might think that we do 52 meetings a year, it can vary year to year. And so then that percentage changes the numbers from year to year. So we might do 54 meetings this year and only 46 next year. And so when you're talking about percentage of those, I think it makes a strong point for Mr. Wiggins' point, but it also, I think, confuses the accountability aspects of it on what's the actual, I mean, by then I guess people are putting pencil to paper and figuring out who's missing a lot of meetings, and you get them 25%, but if you had a hard number, then, you know, that on the big number of years, it kind of gives them a little leeway. I mean, on the little number of years, but on the big number of years, it's crunching in on them. I was just thinking that that a hard number makes it, one, easier for accountability purposes. You can count up that many, but when you're talking about percentages and the numbers of meetings that change every year, the percentage has a tendency to change that actual missing number as well. So that's why I was thinking of the hard number.
Well, can we leave it up to the council to determine each year what's gonna happen? Or
Well,
do we
but
need to put it in the charter?
In theory, Ms. Hubach, the council determines when they have regular sessions, therefore, they do inadvertently dictate. Again,
I
thoughts?
think something as minor as that should not be in the charter. It should be an ordinance, a resolution, or the rules of procedure for the council.
Okay, this is under a specific section though that is governed under the charter. And so that's why it's relevant to our discussion. I will point, because it deals with forfeiture of office. And what we're doing is we're acknowledging when is a council member not performing their duties adequately or respectively. Again, I don't have a hard position on this, unlike other issues. If we did the problem is it's, the reason why I like to stay as broad as possible is because we do run into a situation where we very likely could be even 30,000 people and still have the same number of meetings. So that's acknowledged. The problem is there's also equally the possibility we could have more. And we don't know. And part of when we looked at this charter is we have to see this as a document that's just flexible enough to adapt with change. If it doesn't change, it's perfect. If we do have city change, it needs to be flexible, because again, we'd hate to be in a situation where we were meeting 8 to 10 times a month, and then you say, okay, so 10 times a month times 12 months, that's 120 meetings, you can only miss 4. Man, you're really strapped. And so I may speak to staying toward the 25% as a more flexible number, but I'm not negating the value of either argument. I think that at some point, my only position I've stated from the beginning is, as the complexities of the city grows, it mandates that the representatives are more active. And when, you know, we want them participating, we know there's going to be excuses. There's times to miss meetings, and no different than you do with your work. I will comment though that I look at other municipalities that have fewer meetings, they also have fewer complexities. And so there is, you know, it's kind of one of those you meet based on need, and as Mr. Fairborn regularly presents, as little as about 3 years ago, we virtually never met on that 5th Monday, because and we had times we were canceling work sessions because we just didn't have a large work session schedule. And now we have things where it's like, how late are we pushing out the work session discussion so we don't have 5-hour meetings every work session night? Because there are agendas that we have agendas we will see 10 o'clock. And that's only with 2 or 3 items on the agenda, depending on the complexity. So, and he's backing up agenda items as we speak. When, you know, I loved when I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission, we'd go a period of time during the summer, it's like, we may not even meet this month. Oh no, not with council, that's long past, but I'm not, but again, there can be times of retraction. We could see some decrease or easing up, it's possible, so.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could,
Yes,
could I
please.
ask, okay, so the present language says, fails to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings of the council or misses more than 25% of the council's regular meetings during any 12-month period without being excused by the council. So, it already has a percentage in there, so I guess I would withdraw my,
Topic.
argument for that particular purpose, but, so that really all we've done, or all you all have done now, is to ensure that work sessions are included as part of the meaningful work of the body.
That's correct.
So, so rather than just say 25, or 3 consecutive regular meetings, or 3 consecutive, or 25% unexcused, I mean, is that, how is the language that you have proposed at this time, and maybe Mr. Zer can clear it up, how has it changed the meaning from the original, but now includes work sessions? Other than it saying 25%. So right now, you're wanting to include work sessions in that statement. Why did we changed the meaning of that, like where it says 3 consecutive regular meetings, that we wanted to include or work sessions into that particular section?
Mayor, that's not where
How
I
we
showed.
changed that?
That's not where I showed the work sessions as being included, Mayor. Mine was fails to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings of the council. That would be one
Statement.
determination and statement.
Right.
The next one would be fails to attend more than 25% of the council's regular meetings, or, and I think you'd argue that it's 25% of the council's work session meetings.
Okay.
So 2 different factors, that's how I
Well, if
view
it's
it
as
now.
simple as that, that's what I would hope the commission would consider. And
Yeah,
if that's in
what we-
place,
That's what we have in place.
then I'll shut up.
Well, but I thought, I mean, there's merit to the discussion. The point has merit to discuss. But since it is, I will go ahead and respect the mayor's desire to pull that back. So moving on to item B, commission review of ballot language. This is a very simple, broad request. And I wanted staff, kind of give staff a window of opportunity as well. We have on page 21, you know, it's funny how we came up with approximately 25, I now can say 24 since I removed the recall stuff, but we have approximately 24 issues to bring to the residents. And somehow that got consolidated down to approximately 15 questions, which is an act of wizardry in and of itself. But, and I mean that as a compliment because I don't know if I could have done that. But the problem that I had was because you go from 25 to 15, and our discussion, our changes, and our justification in our report, are those properly syncing up with the 15? Just to make sure we're using the right language, because council members, when they were calling into concern, were actually challenging the ballot language, not expressly our report, which is another variable that we needed to be aware of. So, and just when we talked about compensation, for example, the stuff we had on compensation was far more wordy and complicated than question 3B, and how it got consolidated down to just that one phrase. So does anybody have any concern over that language? Although we will have to change question 3E to change the "and" on the second line between meetings and work. And I believe that, did we have another, we've done some additions as well. Obviously, staff will make the adjustment for it to come back.
On 3B, the consumer price index
Yes,
line
that
have
will
to
be
come out.
removed, yes. Now, for example, do we want to, in question 3B, we're removing or automatically on an annual basis pursuant to the Consumer Price Index to become effective, do we add the language, allow for increases in compensation of the mayor and council members by ordinance, and a mandatory meeting regarding annual meeting of compensation?
However legal decides to.
Do we need to add that in the ballot language, or do we need to just not address it and it's provided in our justification and report?
When we go for bond issue language, that is going to be in front of the voters, the recommendation of council for that language is always to make it as broad as you can and provide the detail in your informational flyers of what that means. That being said, because there was some concern from the council relative to ballot language being vague, we did try to be discriminating between the word vague and the word broad. When we went back to that, I also asked Mr. Zur to do some research. The fundamental changes that the commission now brings to the council cannot be changed by the council. The council has to accept the statutory language that says you all bring the changes. So staff will be recommending to the council that as a ministerial act, they should all be raising their hands to put the fundamental changes onto the ballot. Mr. Zur did research on whether or not the ballot language can be modified by the council if they feel that there is a better way to say it, as long as they do not mess with, as Mr. Zur keeps saying, the meat and potatoes, the actual wording changes that you are proposing to the charter itself. If they feel that there is a better clarifying ballot language that addresses that, they can make changes to the ballot language that you all are sending them. They can't make changes to the other.
So in my terminology, I would tell you, I believe that the proposed changes that you have recommended with regard to the charter itself, I would view those as sacred to this commission. You all have made a recommendation with regard to ballot language. And so with regard to the ballot language that you've got there, unless there is some alternative direction from the commission that this is hard and not altering with regard to ballot language, I believe that as long as the council is not altering the meat and potatoes of the actual ballot of the actual amendments, that they could change words here or there with regard to the ballot language recommendation without running afoul of the spirit of the commission's job.
Okay. Very clear. I will point out that obviously question 3B has to be changed because it can't say allow for increases in compensation in any reference, because actually what we changed said now you don't. So we have to, in fact, it would almost be argued that whole sentence has to go away. Something to properly communicate the change has to be in its place, but that'll completely change.
So something along the lines of require that the compensation of the mayor and council members be placed on a council agenda for discussion at least annually.
Yes, yes.
Would be proposed.
Yes, that would be a more clear. Does anybody have any recommendations we would like to give on ballot language? Do we feel that this recommended ballot language properly communicates our report?
I think it does. I move we accept it.
Mr. Zur?
Is that with regard to question 3 alone? Is that what you're discussing?
Yes. Well, no, my question to the council, or the commission was the entire, all 15 questions.
And then,
I'm-
Mr. Wiggins?
which is for clarification, so question 14B or sorry, 14A would be removed and B would become A and C would become B on the ballot language, just
Yes. that's
making
what I-
sure, so
yeah.
that's removed entirely. 3E, the and becomes an or,
That's
and 3B will be updated. Those are the only three changes, is that correct? Or is there something else? One more?
Yes.
And I'm trying not to confuse the issue greatly with it if I'm capable of doing that. There is reference within the terms of your charter amendment that talks about the municipal judge, and we discussed that this evening. So I would propose that there be a provision that basically says, shall the charter of the city of Raymore be amended to clarify the ability of the city council to rehire a former municipal judge for a new term as municipal judge in spite of the prohibition for other types of municipal employment. So I'm gonna clarify question 3, would suggest clarifying question 3 with that. And then there would be a new question inserted in there with regard to the mayor and the city council, this municipal prosecutor and the municipal judge being able to serve as council and mayor.
And that clears up the first motion that we did.
That's correct.
Perfect. Any other issues regarding ballot language? Any other business or articles of the charter that may come before the commission? Mr. Zerr.
I'm going to, one of the other recommendations, question number 9, there will be a change. So you've got in there, shall the charter of the city of Raymore, Article 4, Mayor, Section 4.4 be amended to authorize the mayor to break a tie vote of the council in all circumstances. That will also impact a change under Section 1.2 with the definitions.
Yes.
So I will insert in there, shall the charter of the city of Raymore, Section 1.2 and Article 4 at that location.
Thank you, because that was one of the catches that I also thought of last week. Okay, excellent. Any other matters? Any public comments?
Everybody come here.
You want to vote on those proposed changes?
No. I believe that those correspond with our report, and those were presented without vote the last time. And we have the ability to make a recommendation to the council.
And do exactly the council, and the council still has the ability to make tweaks to some of that language as well, so.
Tweaks or
Staff
tweets?
Tweet.
Tweets come later, so the.
About 3 o'clock in the morning, according to the president.
Does the chair want any throughput from staff relative to the changes that were made tonight to be delivered to the commission?
To the commission,
To the commission.
if we could have an update, that would be wonderful, prior to the next work session.
So potential submission of a revised or updated.
Yes, and mention revised.
You got it?
This will go before the council on Monday night in work session as item C.
Perfect.
I
Move to adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn, and Ms. Daring seconds. All in favor? We are